so I've always encouraged you guys, get a subwoofer. You really, really, really owe it to yourself to have a quality subwoofer in your system. And I even recommend having more than one subwoofer. Anytime that you can add more than one subwoofer to your setup, it's not about getting more volume. Now, sometimes you may want that, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal for me to adding multiple subwoofers in a setup is, when it comes to subwoofers, you guys know I love subwoofers and I get excited to talk about them. Today we're talking about the Arendal 1723, 1V, and the 1S. Arendal sent me the two subwoofers. It's been quite a while. It's been over 6 months. I've had them set up in my living room, paired with both the Arendal 1723 Tower S, which are the small versions. And then I've also done some listening with the larger 1723 Towers. Now, I did a video a while back comparing what I heard in my theater room between the 1723 Towers and the smaller 1723 S Towers, and so I'll leave that linked in the description below if you want to check that out. But the main focus today is talking about the subwoofers. And so I've had the privilege over probably the past 4 years to listen and demo to various Arendal speakers and subwoofers. They sent me the 2V originally. I've had the 1V, the 1S subwoofers, and each one of these has actually just been really, really just a great experience overall. This video, I just want to share just my experience with the 1V and the 1S, mainly in my living room setup. So to kind of paint the picture, my living room is about 25 feet wide, 15 feet deep, and I've got 12-foot ceilings. Now this room actually opens up to the kitchen. It also opens up to a breakfast nook. It opens up to the dining room, and then there's an office around the corner, which is where I'm at filming this video. So the space is pretty large, and so going into this, I really didn't think that the 1S was going to really pressurize the room by any means. This is a small, very compact subwoofer, small profile, which means that it's going to fit in a lot of spaces much more easily than the larger 1V or their 2V. So the 1S, I'll share with that up front. It was truly surprising. It was surprising to me at how much bass that little joker can produce, especially in this big, massive volume of a room. Now, it doesn't dig super, super deep. Actually, neither one of the subwoofers dig super deep. Pretty much in my room. Now, again, this is going to vary on your room acoustics, but in my living room, when I measured it with RAW, the 1V and 1S both measured about down to 21 hertz, and then it started dropping off pretty quickly below that. And so pretty much about 3 decibels down, we're looking at about 20 hertz. And again, 20 hertz is a solid performance in a subwoofer. If your subwoofers do not produce down to 20 hertz, I truly believe that you're missing out, especially for home theater. Now, music is a little bit different story because there's not a ton of content that is played, 20 hertz, 15 hertz, 10 hertz in music. So if you're just listening to 2-channel music, a 2.1, a 2.2, I think you're going to be okay easily with a subwoofer that can handle down to even 25 hertz, maybe even 30 hertz. But if you're like me and you are passionate about home theater, you really need to get a subwoofer that can handle down to 20 hertz. And these perform down to 20 hertz, no problem. Again, if I were to take them into my theater room, that could change because we can get some boundary gain. And so we might be getting extension beneath 20 hertz in my room. So that could change. But in my living room, that's my experience. And in that setup, mostly I was listening to music, but I also did some listening in like a home theater. Now, this wasn't a full Dolby Atmos home theater like I've got in my theater room. This was a 2.1 system. So basically, I was just running the 1723 Towers paired with the 1S or the 1V or the 1723S with the 1S. I'm going to get all these model numbers. I have to keep them straight. But most of the time I was listening to music because that's just kind of really what that system would represent in most of your living room setups. If you've got two speakers and one subwoofer. But the good thing is, I've got ARC and eARC running from my TV and Apple TV. That's all connected to my Marantz Cinema 30, and then I'm powering those speakers with a pair of Outlaw Audio 2220 monoblock amplifiers. I've got a review on those as well. Super solid amplifiers. So I'm feeding the system with good amount of power for the towers. Now, without the subwoofer, the towers aren't going to provide a lot of bottom end. Again, especially in that big of a room. And so I've always encouraged you guys, get a subwoofer. You really, really, really owe it to yourself to have a quality subwoofer in your system. And I even recommend having more than one subwoofer. Anytime that you can add more than one subwoofer to your setup, it's not about getting more volume. Now, sometimes you may want that, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal for me to adding multiple subwoofers in a setup is the biggest thing is to flatten out that frequency response. When you only have one subwoofer in, say, a living room or a theater room, you're going to have certain frequencies that are going to be peaks, and then you're going to have other frequencies that are going to have dips, so you're going to be missing out on that content. And so adding multiple subwoofers can help you flatten that out once you dial it in with like a mini DSP. Sometimes like things like just Art, or not Art, but Dirac Live, ARC from Anthem Room Correction, even Odyssey, it can help, combine and calibrate those subwoofers so that they're working together. And some of them, one subwoofer's filling in the gaps that the other one is kind of missing because of those room modes in your room. But overall, I was really pleased, even with the little guy, the 1S. I didn't have a lot of high expectations for it. But again, in movies and music, it did really well in my system by adding that bottom octave to be able to feel the bass. Now, one thing that's different between my theater room and my living room, as you can kind of see right here, I've got hardwood floor in my living room. So that, I believe, allows some additional tactile feel from both of those subwoofers versus my theater room, which has concrete. The concrete isn't going to move at all. I don't care what kind of subwoofers you have in there. So I'm not getting any additional reinforcement there. So even though my living room is a much larger space, I was getting some additional reinforcement from the flooring. So keep that in mind when you're designing your home theater. If you've got a room, let's say a bonus room, that's above your house, those are on, it's basically like a wooden floor. You've got not trusses, but you've got, 2x4s under there, or 2x6s, or whatever is holding that up. That can vibrate, and that vibration can transfer into your couch or your theater seats, and that can give you some additional tactile reinforcement. So I was able to feel it wasn't crazy pressurizing that room. Again, this is a massive space, and so ideally I would probably, if I were designing a living room system with the Arendal 1723 speakers, I personally would go with probably two of at least the 1Vs, if not the 2Vs, just to be able to add more tactile response in my living room. But like I said, I was getting good, solid, clean bass. I love the fact that when I would crank it up, I didn't hear any distortion. I didn't hear, sometimes you get some subwoofers that just aren't designed very well. And when you hit those lower frequencies, they begin to kind of flop around and you're like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. I didn't get that with the Arendal 1723s. These are designed very well. And the other thing I really appreciate about really all of the Arendal series, whether it's the 1723s or the 1528s that I also reviewed, I just love the style of them. They're built extremely well. It's kind of interesting because when I move them around, anytime I have to swap them around, I'm like, oh gosh, because they're heavy. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a pain to move these around. They are made of HDF. So high density fiberboard versus your typical MDF, which is medium density fiberboard. So these are really, really dense. And what that helps the speakers and subwoofers is they are inert. They don't vibrate. They don't have the resonance that some of the like thinner materials and lesser dense materials, subwoofers and speakers that some other manufacturers use, that they have to add a lot more internal bracing to stiffen theirs up. And so when you move these around, you know their quality just by their weight. But not only that, even looking at all the aspects. So their speaker grills are made of metal. So these aren't cheap speaker grills. They're very, very robust. I feel 100% confident when my grandson is over here. He's only 2 years old and he's running around the living room playing. I don't have the single concern that he's going to poke in one of the tweeter or punch in one of the drivers. That grill is not moving. It's got really strong magnets, and so I don't have to have any concern. So if you've got pets, if you've got young children, having that metal grill is definitely a really nice protective layer to protect your drivers and your tweeter. With that said, one of the negatives that I see with the design of the speaker is when you place the speaker grill on, every time that I place it on there, I have to align it. I have to kind of straighten it up because the way that it was designed, the magnets, they're very, very strong. Now, don't get me wrong. They're very strong, but they don't pull the speaker grill and lock it into place. Some speaker designers I've seen, they've designed it in such a way that whenever you put the speaker grill to the speaker, it just kind of snaps in place and it goes exactly where it should. It's not cockeyed, it's not bent or crooked. With these, I always found that I put it on there and then I have to kind of put my hands along the side and just kind of massage it and make sure that it's perfectly vertical and it's flush at the top and the bottom. So not a big deal, but I would love to see Arendal in the future, maybe in the future redesign of either the 1723s, the 1528s, or maybe even a new series that they come out with. At least consider what would it take to where the magnets are designed in such a way that when you just bring it, even with 2 fingers, if you were to bring that together, once it gets close, it's just going to snap in place and it's going to be exactly in line and positioned correctly. To me, that would just be a really nice touch. But the overall quality and the craftsmanship and the engineering that Arendal places into their speakers and subwoofers, I really, really like. When you flip the speakers around and the subwoofers around, you're presented with this really nice, robust amp plate on the subwoofer side of it. The amp is not only powerful, but it has a lot of features. A lot of subwoofers, you get a couple of dials on the back. You get a crossover, you get a gain, you might get a trigger on and off, and that's it. Well, this amplifier is digital, and so you've got a lot of customization. You've got DSP built into the amplifier. You've got multiple ways that you can turn it on as far as triggering and the subwoofer figuring out when I need to be on and when I need to be off. There's just a lot of flexibility on that, and the great thing is the one app can control multiple subwoofers. So if you had 2 or 4 subwoofers in your room, you can easily switch between each one of those subwoofers, adjust their volume, add PEQ. You can do all sorts of things. So if you're one of those tweaker kind of guys and you like to get in there and tinker and take measurements and do some adjustments, it's got some built-in tools that can really, really help you dial in your system and calibrate that, whether you're adjusting phase, whether you're adjusting volume, or like I said, adding PEQ. And so the subwoofers are designed very well. Now, if you don't have a lot of space, definitely consider maybe one of the smaller subwoofers. The 1S, being a sealed subwoofer, allows them to make that subwoofer a lot more compact. Now, typically, the trade-off with a sealed subwoofer versus a ported subwoofer is the sealed subwoofer oftentimes we'll dig a little bit deeper, so you might get a little bit more low end extension out of it, but you tend to lose some output near the port tune of the ported equivalent. So comparing like the 1V and the 1S, the 1V is going to have more output near its tune frequency, I guess is what you would call it. And so that's something just to consider when you're designing your setup. If you've got a large amount of space, I say the bigger the better. If you can go with a massive 15-inch, 13-inch, something like that, anything, when it gets to like 10 and 12 inch, you're just not going to get a ton of output. Now, granted, if you were in a room like this, very small space, you don't need 15s, you don't need 4 15s, you don't need 18-inch woofers. But if you've got a decent sized living room, I say the bigger the better. So if you can afford to go with the 1V or the 2V, you're going to get a ton of output, lots of flexibility in that internal amplifier, and it's just a great looking subwoofer. So the 1V they sent me in white satin, and I love that finish. I probably over the past year or two, I have really come to like white finish speakers as well as subwoofers. Now, part of that is just personal design and decor in our living room. Jessica, over the past probably couple years, has been updating our living room and our kitchen that's right next to the living room, and you can see that from the living room. And so we've got a lot more white decor in the room. And so adding white speakers and white subwoofers just blends so much nicer. But the great thing is they do have the black satin finish if you just want a more traditional looking speaker or subwoofer. But overall, this system, it was just a lot of fun. Of course, I shared with the 1723 series the level of just clarity, the detail. I love female vocals on the 1723 series. My preference, I like the larger towers. Part of the reason why I like the larger towers is it moves the tweeter up more on axis with my ears. And it just had a bigger stage, like a bigger sound stage, in my theater room and even in my living room. And so if you can go with it again, I like the taller towers. I don't think you're going to experience a ton difference in the bottom end. And again, if you're adding a subwoofer, it's kind of a moot point anyway. But my preference would be to go with the 1723 towers, and then probably the one, like I said, I tend to like, unless you've got 18-inch or larger speakers, I tend to prefer a ported design. So the 1V or the 2V, that would be my recommendation. If you got larger 18-inch drivers, then that's where I tend to shift the other way. And I really prefer a sealed enclosure for that, because you're getting tons of output. You don't need more output. It just adds that lower extension. So overall, man, I've just been very pleased with the 1V and the 1S. If you've got a smaller space, it's a super compact design, beautiful styled cabinet, a lot of control with the DSP, the digital amplifier. Their app is done really, really well. Never had it crash. Unlike some other manufacturers, I've had theirs that they continually crash. It's kind of frustrating. But this was done very well. I like how it's super clean, makes it easy to navigate. You don't have to hunt and figure out like, man, where is that setting at? And everything just makes sense. So their team did a really good job on the app and giving you just a lot of flexibility on that. I'll leave a link to both of the 1S and the 1V down in the description below if you want to check those out, and also the 1723 series. Again, I definitely highly recommend this system. It's just a great, great looking speaker subwoofer. Of course, they've got the matching tower or the matching bookshelves. You can get the center channel as well. So I'll link those down in the description. But I've enjoyed my time, but I've got to get all of these speakers, the 1723 towers, the S, the 2 subwoofers. I'll get those boxed up this weekend, get those shipped back over to them. But I appreciate them allowing me the opportunity to just experience the 1723 towers as well as the subwoofers with that. Now, if you're interested in more Arendal speakers and subwoofers, be sure to check out this playlist right here. Hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless, and I will catch you in the next video.